Welcome to the Beyond the Prophy podcast. I am very excited to have this special guest. I first want to thank Mark Hartley, who is the editor of the RDH magazine, and I like to thank him for putting me in connection with Ellie Naderi. I am so very excited. I feel like this conversation is going to be a very good one of which that could really inspire you to see what else is out there in dental hygiene, and especially when it comes to leadership. So I would like to extend a very warm welcome to Ellie Naderi. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Jasmine. It's an honor, and I'm very excited to speak to the broader group and just bring forward all the opportunities that have been afforded to me to bring me to this point in my career and hopefully inspire somebody listening today as to what else they can do with their dental hygiene career moving forward.
Yeah. I mean, when I had the opportunity to talk with you briefly, I was on fire because I was just like, oh my gosh, all the amazing stuff that you've done in your career. But let's start with the basic, which is why did you choose dental hygiene?
Well, the basic reason is because, just like most of us, I had a bad dental experience as a child. I had a need for a molar root canal at the age of 7. The tooth was just barely erupted. And, I remember at that early age thinking that there has to be a better way to do this, and somebody should have educated my parents better. And so it really got me turned on to the idea of preventive care. And while I was going to high school, my sister actually ended up getting into dental school. And even at that point, even though I really liked the idea of helping others in dentistry, I was thinking I might even go into business school. But she really inspired me to go into dentistry. And in the end, it worked out for the best because I was able to render that preventive care to patients. But I was also able to influence a bigger group of people and hygienists that we can talk about on tonight's interview that has really afforded me a even bigger, further outreach to many, many patients across the country.
Wow. So I mean, that's fabulous. Most people, when they've have a negative experience, they actually stay away from dentistry. And it's wonderful how you turn that negative into a positive so that you can make a difference. So, when you finished dental hygiene school, what did you receive? An associate's or bachelor's degree?
I originally achieved an associate's degree from Cerritos College, but even going to dental hygiene school, I knew that there was something further that I wanted to do with my career. Anytime I had an opportunity to speak to one of the reps that came into our program, I was always staying behind after class to chat with them to see how they furthered their career opportunities. So even at that point, I knew that I would go back to school at some point. I
Hmm.
just didn't know what direction I would go or how that would unfold. But I had a really awesome opportunity to do a table clinic as a dental hygiene student on chemotherapeutics, and that just expanded my horizon. And that's how I ended up transitioning from my clinical practice to the pharma side of dentistry. And that in itself was a very awesome opportunity for me, one that afforded me to meet a lot of people. And I think one of the messages I want to put out there is if you have career aspirations for yourself, the best thing you can do is network, to show up to the association meetings, to go to trade shows, to just stop and ask people, what did you do? How did you get here? And how did you further yourself?
Absolutely. And I love the fact that you mentioned how your foundational education, which is the table clinics, actually inspired you. And one of the courses that I teach that I absolutely love is public health. And for many years, I did the table clinic and I would help the students. And what I loved about having that responsibility was challenging them to think outside of the box because they're so focused on the clinical requirements, their competencies, getting the base knowledge that they need to pass the boards. But so many leave school and burn out within a few years. And it's so wonderful to hear you say how you were thinking outside of the box early on, which is what I'm hoping for all clinicians, especially when they are dental hygiene students and they're first starting out, to see that the possibilities are limitless.
I completely agree with you. You just never know what that next step can lead into. And for me, it led into a really awesome opportunity with a very reputable pharma company. So I'm very grateful for it.
So with that opportunity with you with the pharma company, how so that was basically you able to get that role from networking.
So basically, what happened is I fell in love with the product because just like any other clinician out there, when we're clinically sold and we clinically sell ourselves on a product, we're going to drive it in the practice. And basically my utilization of this product was so high that the rep came into the office and said, how many hygienists work here, first of all, and who are they? And my office manager's response was, it's Ellie, and she's here only a couple times a week and we don't have anybody else. And he was blown away as to how I was able to communicate the need for this product to my patients and how readily I could move it off the shelf. And it all stemmed back from doing that research myself and being
Mm-hmm.
open-minded and clinically being sold on the product,
Mm-hmm.
which then led them recruiting me to do some consulting for them so that I could basically share my clinical experience with other clinicians and help them connect with their patients. Because as we know, one of the biggest challenges in dental hygiene is getting our patients to say yes to the treatment that they very much so need.
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes so much easier for us to have those conversations with patients when we believe they truly need a product that we're presenting. And
Absolutely.
that table clinic, going that direction and selling it to myself, basically allowed me to sell it to patients, which earned me some recognition. And then from there, I was asked to join the company as a full-time account manager, which is where really my career truly ended up unfolding because I developed business acumen. I went from just knowing 1 through 30 teeth in the mouth to where I could very efficiently run an Excel spreadsheet and analyze the business and just become, transition my focus into more of a business role, which then opened up many, many more opportunities for me and where I am here today.
Unbelievable. And listeners, we're holding back where she is today because it is phenomenal. I do want to ask you when you started that role, because when you first stated when you were initially thinking of school, you thought about business, but you went into dental hygiene. And now you're offered this role to be an account manager with a pharmaceutical company where you have to then now take off the clinician hat and put on a business hat. Did you have any fear, or were you concerned with being able to adapt in that environment? Like, what pushed you through that period where your professional phase was almost changing?
Oh, absolutely. Anytime there's change, and the only thing I knew was being chairside as a clinician, there's some level of fear and anxiety, but I knew that I had to put my trust in myself, my ability to be successful, because I knew that I could influence my patients chairside. I believe that I could influence other clinicians to do the same thing with their patients. And that's where my success really came from, is teaching them the ability to get past those financial barriers where patients say no to treatment. And it was momentarily scary because I had to believe that I was going to be able to be influential over a large group of people, and they weren't necessarily clinically sold like I was because they
Mm-hmm.
hadn't gone through that process. But I took the leap of faith, and it was the best thing that I've ever done for myself. I'll be honest, I still miss picking up the scaler. So I would, pick it up in my sister's office and throw my kids in the chair every chance I got. Um, but after a while, when you get to see what an impact you can have, not just on the group of patients that you're seeing within your own dental hygiene practice, but see other hygienists also be able to influence their patients in such a positive manner, that you really feel like you still are chair side. So that
Mm-hmm.
element is very much fulfilled for you. And it just comes down to believing in yourself, being confident in the things that you know that you're able to do, and taking a risk. At the end of the day, yes, I was confident in myself, but there was no guarantee that I was going to be one of the top account managers. And when you're in sales, it's a very cutthroat environment. If you don't
Mm-hmm.
make If you don't make your numbers, you're not going to be around for much longer. But because I had that credibility, because I had been chair side, I actually was one of the most successful account managers when compared to others that didn't have a clinical background. So just
Mm-hmm.
being able to draw back on the things that we know as clinicians
Mm-hmm.
and apply it to the outside world, outside of our operatory, you can be tenfold more credible when you're talking to people. And I think that's the element that as hygienists, as listeners, you have to realize is, yeah, you are credible. You have created a patient in your lap and you know what the barriers are, and you've likely heard all the pushbacks from the patients. And if you're one that's been able to rise above it, then somebody out there could benefit from your help in helping advance their business or their dental practice. Or you might be of value as a consultant somewhere, or the possibilities are endless.
Yes, yes, I love it. Oh my goodness, if I can jump for joy without messing up the recording, I would. Because I often say that for dental hygienists, and especially when I'm trying to really push the fact that we need to think beyond the prophy. And thinking beyond the prophy is not just clinical, not just, I'm sorry, outside of clinical treatment. It could be in clinical. And what I find is that most hygienists, they are beaten down mentally. They don't have that confidence, and they don't realize that everything they have or the experiences that they can have are opportunities to put things in your toolbox. And you don't know at what point that particular experience could benefit you in the future. And I love the fact that you mentioned how this really has propelled you into the role that you have today. You also had the opportunity to work in academia, which I think is also very important because it also builds, in my opinion, from my experience, leadership skills. It allows you the opportunity to find ways to communicate more effectively, um, to get to understand health outcomes, but also educational outcomes. It helps you to think in a different way. So, how has that role served you and in your professional career?
I think that's a great question. First of all, I thoroughly enjoyed academia, whether it be didactic courses or clinical courses. I love the student interaction. And I happen to think that dental hygiene students are some of the best, most eager students that there possibly can be. They're always prepared and a pleasure to work with. But how that's applied to my current role is it's really taught me to be patient when I'm communicating with my staff. I come at my leadership skills with the approach of education and training as opposed to, a heavy-handed approach, which a lot of times can occur in the corporate setting. So I think it's really taught me to be a teacher in my leadership role as opposed to just a manager in my leadership role. And I really love encouraging employees and hygienists and whoever else that I'm working with to go back to the basics with how they're taught in school, because that will never fail you. The
Mm-hmm.
way you teach in school, the way Esther Wilkins has things spelled out for you will never fail you. When in doubt, always go back to what you were taught in school. And it's something that I preach to and talk about all the time. And I think having that experience in my background, even as a leader today, helps me be able to bring my employees back to, okay, remember when you first started driving, where do you keep your hands? It's 10 and 2. And then after a few years, you slack and maybe there's bone loss in the radiograph and we just choose to overlook it
Mm-hmm.
and go to that prophy. So let's get back to 10 and 2 and let's go back to what we were taught in school, and the AAP guidelines will never fail you. And
Mm-hmm.
so it kind of shapes my style as a leader, because I do have that educator in my background.
Yeah, yeah. And I love how you mentioned that because it just made me think about the times where I've temped and they'll ask me, "Are you a new graduate?" I'm like, "No." I've been a hygienist for 10 and with it as an assistant 15 years, but I like to they normally say that because I still barrier the way, not all the way like it is in school, but I'm very, very particular with my clinical notes and when and am I treating my patient? There's certain things that I just don't cut corners with. And I love the fact that you mentioned that when you do serve as faculty, it just makes you appreciate that standard of practice. And that's what is challenging to keep up in place when you're practicing because of so many things that could be an obstacle, which is insurance or the practice philosophy. All of that can impact your standard of care.
Yeah, absolutely. And my personal belief is, we have taken an oath and we have to uphold our oath to our license.
Absolutely.
And the things that we learn in school absolutely need to apply today. I get that it's human nature. The 10th time the patient, yells at you and says, "No, I don't want that SRP. I just want what the insurance covers." It becomes intimidating for clinicians to do the right thing. But I always, always encourage, don't jeopardize the patient's care, don't jeopardize your own license, and always go back to how you were taught in school.
Absolutely. So, listeners, I am speaking to the Senior Vice President of Dental Hygiene Operations. Say what? What? For Dental One Partners. I think it's absolutely amazing what you're doing. Many hygienists, though, don't understand what a DSO is. So before we get into your role that you currently have and what your responsibilities are, let listeners know what exactly is a DSO.
A dental service organization is a DSO where basically one corporation either owns or manages a large subset of practices. They're becoming more and more popular as practice management demands become stricter and insurance fee schedules go lower and marketing potentials become more difficult for private practices. A lot of times doctors are selling their dental practices to dental service organizations. So it's a concept and a model that will only grow from here. The 10-year forecast for this business is that it will only grow and there will be more and more presence of dental service organizations in the future.
Wow, amazing. Amazing. Now, why did you choose from your career and what you've done, why did you choose to work for a DSO? And why would you say it's a good option or an excellent option for hygienists who want to think beyond the prophy?
So funny enough, I didn't always think that it was going to be the best option for me. I had my skepticism. I wasn't sure how I was going to like it. I was a private practicing hygienist when I practiced dental hygiene. I had my perceptions. I'd heard the stigma out there. But I had an opportunity to join a different dental service organization about 7 years ago as a director of dental hygiene. And the folks that I interviewed with were very inspiring, extremely ethical, and they were talking the same clinical language that I like to speak and going back to the basics on how things are taught in school. And I said, you know what, maybe I will give this opportunity a try because it sounds like, they have a great chief clinical officer that I get along with. So I gave it a go and I came on board as director of dental hygiene. Well, little did I know that opportunity actually afforded me to grow into a senior vice president of not just the dental hygiene business, but I was managing 7 lines of business at that dental service organization. And it ended up being one of the best experiences of my life to date, where I really got to understand and appreciate the daily tasks that go into the operations and upholding many dental practices. I was overseeing 55 at the time. And then from there, I just had an opportunity to move over to other dental service organizations because the niche is a very small niche. Knowing how to manage in this environment is becoming a broader scope for a lot of people, but currently speaking, it's a huge area of growth and opportunity because there are very few people like myself out there that have walked the line of, the clinical practice, but also understand the business management side of things. Now, that said, there's so many opportunities and so many different ways to enter a dental service organization. For example, one of my regional hygiene directors that works here with me at Dental One Partners, I hired right out of USC. She was a practicing hygienist for me in one of my practices. And then we elevated her to a training role. She was a trainer for a very short time. She did very, very well as a trainer. And then she became a regional director at that time and has since, jumped ship and followed me as part of my team here. But the reason why I say that is because I don't want listeners to be discouraged. Just because you don't have the business acumen now does not mean you can't develop it in this environment. And what I never understood is even though I was comfortable and nobody was rocking the boat in my world, in my private practice, I wasn't growing. I wasn't having that best practice opportunity that we have here in dental service organizations.
Mm-hmm.
Some of our practices have 3, 4 hygienists. Sometimes we have 26 practices within a 20, 30-mile radius. We have evening meetings, CE courses, conference calls. If you need support, if you need to talk about a case, it's just one phone call away. And that's the element that you really miss when you're not in a dental service organization. And especially one like Dental One Partners, where the support structure is built in such that, I'm not looking to do my job forever. Like I just mentioned earlier, I just came out of a much, much broader role than just overseeing dental hygiene. Mm-hmm. So my philosophy is I hire my replacements, and my direct reports hire their replacements. So there's constant growth in this environment. And like I said, because we do have a 10-year vision of dental service organizations being the main go-to employment opportunities in this country, I think it's a really bright idea for us to, as hygienists and clinicians, to think about dental service organizations even at the practice level.
Wow. I've got two things to say. First of all, I love the fact that you said hire my replacement. That's powerful. Because, I've had so many conversations where people, where we've talked about, the new generation of people coming up and how sometimes as a new generation, we may feel like we're stepping on toes and that those who may be in a higher position are not really ready to bring us forward. So it's wonderful to hear that in a DSO you have the opportunity to really grow and actually to be nurtured, which you don't find, like you said, in private practice. You tend to hit a ceiling and then that's it, which is why I feel like there's so much career dissatisfaction for many in our profession.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I do want to just ask you and address the stigma that's associated with being a DSO. Why do you think that exists?
It's hard to say. I mean, I think there's so many different levels of dental service organizations out there that I think listeners need to understand that if you do want to consider working for a dental service organization, you want to do your homework. You want to know who is at the helm of the company. Is the management team from a clinical background? I think those questions are really important to ask during the interview process. Sometimes dental service organizations have management teams that are not clinical, and so they might be focused and driving on things that us as clinicians may not feel are as important, in day-to-day dental practice that they may, as business people, view as important. For us, I can just speak for ourselves and the way we operate here. Every single person on the management team, including our regional VPs of operations, have at least been in a dental practice. They understand patient interaction. They sympathize with the necessity of quality of care and patient retention and not overwhelming the schedule. Sometimes maybe a dental service organization might ask the clinician to see many, many patients, and that might compromise quality. So do your homework. Not all dental service organizations are the same. I think it's really important to realize that dental service organizations are now understanding that if they're going to be eligible to attract quality clinicians and good talent, that they have to take a step back and assess the way they do things. Here at Dental One Partners, for example, we pride ourselves in, yes, we have the corporate structure, we have the support, we have the CE courses, we have cutting edge technology, all of that is in place, but we also provide our clinicians clinical autonomy. So we're not going to tell you how to practice dentistry. Are we going to look for 5-point assessments and make sure, recession and clinical attachment loss, those things are accounted for? Absolutely, because that's a compliance item and we want to make sure our clinicians are committed to excellence. That's without without saying, but we're never going to tell you how to do dentistry beyond that. We just want to make sure that you're compliant in what AAP guidelines are and what the ADA standards are. Outside of that, you get to use, the materials you want to use, the instruments you want to use. And we have buying power, so we're able to negotiate really good fees for some really awesome brand names. So I think personally, if I had to do things all over again and go back to clinical practice, hands down, I would do my homework and pick some of the best ones out there. Not to mention, a lot of times private practices don't give hygienist benefits. Dental service organizations a lot of times are giving health benefits, dental benefits, vacation hours, 401k. So there's just a million and one reasons why all listeners should at least consider looking into what dental service organizations exist in their markets.
Amazing. I love it. All right. So, what is a typical day like for you?
Oh, it's busy. It's busy. So we have close to 170 practices. So, what we do is we support the hiring process. So my team and I do a clinical interview with every single hygienist. And the things that we're looking for is making sure, they can connect with patients, they're doing their assessments, that they're converting patients with disease and, not engaging in supervised neglect. That's a huge no-no for me on my list. So
Mm-hmm.
we do run through all of that. But also, my personal role in the organization is making sure that my team has access to the best technology, the best advancements out there. So I'm constantly doing research. I'm meeting with vendors. I'm seeing what else we can do to broaden our scope of practice in the dental practices. And just really making sure that the support system is there for our teams, from an operations standpoint. If the practices are slow, we're providing marketing. So it's my job and my teams, my regional hygiene directors' roles to make sure that our hygienists is as happy and as successful as they can be, and our patients are receiving the best care that they possibly can be receiving. So, in a nutshell, I know it sounds like a summary here, but it's busy.
Yeah.
There's a lot that factors into that.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, with the roles that you've had, how have you developed? Because with any role that you have, especially when you are thinking beyond the prophy and you are trying things outside of clinical care, how did you prepare your mindset? Maintaining joy as much as possible. How did you prepare your mindset for the various roles that you've experienced so far in your career?
Even before I get to the role that I'm going into, I'm preparing for it. So, for example, when I was in my director of hygiene role in the former dental service organization, I would look at the other senior VP that was overseeing the entire business and thinking, I really like the way they do this, and they're getting results by interacting this way with the employees. And if I were them, these are the things I would do differently. So even though I wasn't in the role, I was always preparing myself for the role. And even here in this environment, I'm always coaching my teams to think, you say think beyond the prophy, and that's exactly the right phrase for it. What else can they do? Where can they see themselves? And sometimes the answer may be, you know what, Ellie, I like patient care. I just want to be here and stay here. But I still want to encourage them and challenge them to think, you know what, God forbid, tomorrow you don't know what's going to happen. You can't pick up that scaler anymore. What would you do different? What opportunity would interest you? And so I think, for the listeners, just keeping an open mind and not thinking, oh my gosh, no, I'm stuck to this chair for the rest of my career, and really begin to think, you know what, I think I could do Ellie's job, and she's done it and she's prepped for it. I wonder how she's prepped for it, and just get your mindset ready for that moment.
Hmm. Absolutely. And with women, we're multidimensional. And most listeners know that I co host the Mom Genesis podcast. And I do want to add in here briefly that not only have you had this wonderful professional career, you're also raising children. And so, what would you say to a listener that may be in a situation where they are parents? They may be a single parent. What advice would you give them in maintaining that career satisfaction while handling that role, which can be challenging by itself, but especially if someone is doing it as a single parent?
Great question, because I am a single parent. As a matter of fact, when I transitioned into my role with a former dental service organization, I was amidst of a divorce. And so it was one of the most difficult moments in my life. But the advice I would give is there's never going to be a better time. You can always think it's just busy right now. It's going to get better in the future. I can tell you from personal experience, my daughter is about to turn 10, my son is 11, and over the course of 7 years, it's only gotten busier. So do it now, make that decision now. And what better reason than your children to be that role model for my daughter? It just warms my heart because she does see me work hard and she does see that I can stand up on my own 2 feet and provide a very comfortable life for myself and the two of them. And that every day is my inspiration and my motivation to do the things that I do.
Oh, I love it. And little girls need to see that, especially. Especially. I have two little girls myself, 8 and 6.
It's
So,
fun ages, fun ages.
yes, yep, I just interviewed the oldest one. I think episode like 41 or 42. So she actually wants to be a dental hygienist, which I find it's cute hearing her
That's
say that.
awesome.
All right.
Awesome.
All right, here's the last question that I have for you because I try to keep the episode short, especially for most hygienists. We're busy. We're busy, 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 busy. And like you mentioned earlier, you said networking is important, asking people how they have gotten to where they are. And that's essentially what this podcast is, especially for those that aren't able to make it to every single event and meet amazing individuals like yourself. So tell me, in your professional career, what was the best career advice you've ever received?
Hmm. Good question. I would say that it was early on in my career, even before dental hygiene. I was working as a dental assistant in a private practice with a consultant, and he taught me to not be afraid to have difficult conversations with patients. He said there's going to be every single kind of human out there. Most will hopefully love you. Some are just not going to like you no matter what you do. You stick to your ethics, you stick to your guns, and you do what's right, and you always present the correct information to the patient. And I have done that my entire career, and it has really paid off for me.
Wonderful. I love that. I think that is a hurdle that I am still working through. It's a skill that you have to gain, and each conversation that you have, you slowly but surely get better with it.
Absolutely, absolutely.
All right. I told you that was the last question, but I just thought of another one that I have to ask you.
Sure.
All right. Favorite leadership book?
Mm,
That's my
you
dog,
got.
by the way, listeners. I'm so sorry. I don't know what is going on.
I would say a really good basic to start for most listeners would be Minute Manager. That's an easy read. It's a good place to start, but I don't know if it's a favorite, but I think for most people it's very applicable.
Okay. And your favorite personal development book?
Let's see. You're asking me the tough questions here. Well, my life revolves around business, so I would say the culture of success. And
Oh,
I think, yeah, that's a really, really good book where it talks about, um, you know, everybody plays a role in success, and success starts with leaving your problems at the door when you walk into the practice and walking in with a positive attitude. The attitude of when you're in the practice, you're on stage. Essentially, just like, the Disney cast members are huge about being on stage when they're at work. And that really applies to what we do in the dental practice because not only are we on stage for our patients, but we're also on stage for one another and our teammates, because if one person comes into a practice with a negative attitude or is a naysayer, it can just kill the vibe for the whole practice. And it really
yes.
takes that team cultural success in order to drive the things that we want to drive at the practice level.
Oh my goodness, yes. It can be a poison, and some people let them stay for too long. Too long.
Well, you have to love what you do, and if you don't, listeners, I think it's important to look for the next opportunity. You shouldn't have to
Yes.
wait for somebody to tell you to leave. If you're not happy, then go pursue happiness because this life is just too short to do anything otherwise.
Yes. That was a final close. That was a great close right there. Change,
Thank you
change,
so
change.
much.
Yeah, thank
Thank you,
you.
Jasmine. Thank you. It was a pleasure speaking with you, and I really
Yes.
appreciate the opportunity. And I hope I've inspired someone today. And I'm always available. I'm on LinkedIn. I love it when young hygienists email me and say, "How can I do what you've done?" I have a ton of tips for you, and obviously, I also have a lot of employment opportunities. We're hiring in 13 states, so I would love the opportunity to speak to anybody that is open to it.
So LinkedIn will be a great contact for you.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Well, everyone, she's on LinkedIn. I will have her link to her profile in the show notes. I'm so honored to have this opportunity to speak to you. I know you're very, very busy, but I can't wait to share this episode with everyone. I am certainly inspired, and I know that it would definitely motivate others as well. So thank you again.
Thank you, Jasmine. Have a great evening.
All right, you too. Bye bye.
Bye bye.